Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. It's been 4 or 5 days, maybe a bit more since the Nottingham Forest debacle. I've given myself a little bit of time to calm down, but with the Liverpool game coming up tomorrow, I've got George Nelson back on the channel to talk about a few Tottenham transfer rumours and, of course, that Forest game and the Liverpool game. How are you doing, George?
I'm all right. We'll get to the rumours in a bit, but we need to deal with the Nottingham Forest game. That has to happen.
Okay, let me just remind the audience first of where they can get their vintage Spurs jerseys. okjersey.com. They sell the best current and retro shirts around. Scan the QR code and use the code BARN for 8% off in the coupon box. Yes, we'll get to those Tottenham transfer rumours, but I cannot keep George from the soapbox. George, tell us. And well, I'll tell you what, let's give us a picture. Where were you watching the game? I feel like you and I were both feeling pretty confident naively going into that game. Where were you watching and how quickly did that confidence evaporate?
I remember saying that I was pivoting between a narrow win and a draw.
Yeah.
And that would largely depend on the starting lineup, which way I would go. I couldn't have imagined a starting lineup that would have had me feeling that we were going to lose like resoundingly. And that wasn't a lineup. I looked at that lineup and I thought there are two things I wouldn't do that he's done, but this is still good enough to compete. We were really, really bad in that game. We're about as bad as we've been. Maybe not the very worst. I still have it down as the third worst performance of the season. But
Low bar.
Well, you know what? I actually did the specifics on that because sometimes it gets a bit blurry in my head. So I put them down on paper. And I put all our league performances in 3 categories, just to simplify it. 3 categories of just god-awful, something in the middle, and something encouraging. In other words, had we done one of these immediately after the game, what would our tone have been? Positive, negative, in the middle. It's actually exactly like the results. There's 6 good ones, 4 and 6 bad ones.
Yeah.
Now, draw your own conclusions. The 6 good ones aren't necessarily the 6 wins, and the 6 bad ones aren't necessarily the 6 losses.
Yeah.
But it's more or less that way. Now, it's worth me getting out before getting into nuance because most people don't have the patience to listen to nuance when they feel that that person has an agenda. So let's be super clear about this. I think that performance was dreadful. Yeah. And I think many of the recent performances have been dreadful. But I also don't want to get rid of the manager now. Let's just get that on the table right now so that hopefully people then engage with some of the more subtle, reasons for that.
Okay, just for full transparency, I'm going to disagree and say I do want him out now. But that's, like I said to you before we came on, I'm a little calmer than I was on, at the weekend, but kind of almost in the readiness to be apoplectic again tomorrow. But yes, good. Sure. You've laid it out on the table. You still think Thomas Frank could potentially drag it back?
I still don't know, and I want to know. Now that there is a point when that gets silly, and maybe the Liverpool game will be that point. I remember
and it has been for previous Spurs managers, Sherwood, AVB.
AVB is the obvious one because that was in a bad place, and then the 5-0 home defeat against Liverpool ended it once and for all. Something like that this weekend, it would be very difficult for Frank or for somebody like me to come back with anything after that. But I'm not quite there yet, and I'll tell you why. It's because, in my eyes, that last loss was a different kind of loss. People have put it, I think, quite lazily, or maybe they've missed out on something, in the same category as the Arsenal match and the Chelsea match and some of the others. For me, the reason why the Arsenal game is standalone the worst one isn't just because of the result and it was against our rivals and the circumstances. It was because there literally wasn't an attempt at doing anything constructive in that game. Every single time we had possession in that match, and which is very little, it resulted in the most blatant hoof up to a forward who couldn't hold the ball up and couldn't win aerial duels. And that was all we had. It was very clear within 15 minutes of that game that there was no plan on how to progress the play up the field. This wasn't that. This was just one of the most inept displays of passing I've ever seen. But it was an attempt at passing, and the data backs that up. There weren't as many long balls as I'm hearing from, a lot of the content creators who are angry at that display. basically putting Frank in the long ball merchant school. That's not what happened in that match. I wouldn't ask anybody to go and rewatch that match. That's cruel.
Can I just add something quickly? Sorry to interrupt, though. In that first 20 minutes, what you're saying is absolutely right. And you could tell it was going to be like that in the first minute. There were like 2 or 3 inept passes in the first minute. But what I would say is in that first 20 minutes, both teams were completely inept at passing the ball. I don't know what it was, but that adds another layer of anger to me, which is like, why are we then the team who, are unable to drag it round? I think that's where Forest really, maximised and used their physicality over us. Really.
And that's where my biggest Thomas Frank reservation comes in. It's not about perceived pattern of play or lack of pattern of play. It's to what extent have the players already zoned out? Because we start off games badly and we start off second halves terribly. Those are his obvious windows into communicating with the players. Just before the game, halftime, their response to whatever rousing thing he does, the evidence is horrible. I mean, the Arsenal game, we couldn't have come out more flat-footed in the second half. This game, we've matched it. A couple of things I want to touch on though in that first half.
Just before you go into that, can I just because I'm bouncing off you?
Yeah.
Obviously, Mickey van der Ven did this interview this week where it came out with Gary Neville, where he talked about how whenever Ange Postecoglou did a pre-match or halftime speech, they were ready to go through a wall for him. They were ready to fight for him. Is there any element in your head that potentially those players are in the changing room just being like, well, this isn't like Ange was, in terms of not the tactical wise, but in terms of the motivation wise and get me over that white line to fight?
I agree. I 100% go with you on that on that theory. They're still at the "you're not my real dad" phase. Yeah. They're still operating in that space. Now, this is why that loss against Paris Saint-Germain hit me probably harder than it hit the average Spurs fan, who maybe dismissed it as a glorified Community Shield type match. And, Paris Saint-Germain, they're always going to come back. For me, it was very important to get that really early trophy because it would have silenced all of those kind of dressing room dissenters who somehow
look what I can do for you.
Look what I can do for you. And look what he's done for us in the very first match before we've played a fully competitive game yet. He's already delivered what Ange spent 2 years delivering, right?
Yeah. Let me just say, I just want to say one other thing, George, as well. Sorry, just while I remember, because I think you're going to come on to, because you mentioned it earlier, the team selection. And I just want to throw my hands up first. I don't want to be a person after the fact, because when I looked at the team selection for the Forest game, I was like, I think he's found what he wants. Yeah. And I think this is pretty much close to the right selection, which I will also say, and I probably said before, very regularly when I agree with the selection the manager's made, we then get absolutely pumped, and it happened again. But in hindsight, I look back on that selection probably without much knowledge of, I know about Elliot Anderson, Morgan Gibbs-White, but Sangare, I'll be honest, I didn't know much about. But in hindsight, I'm able to look back and say, Thomas Frank, it's your job to know how physical that midfield is going to be, and you shouldn't have picked that team. So sorry to interrupt again, but just I don't want to come across to the audience like, oh, you're just saying it after the fact, because I throw my hands up. I thought it was the right selection.
But in a way, by saying that, you're further kind of emphasizing my point on it's too early for us to do anything with this manager, because he keeps selecting the sorts of teams that, if we're being completely honest, we're not that miles off selecting ourselves based on the pool of players he has to work with, which tells me that we need at least another window of bringing in additional talent. He's had a closer look at the squad now. Yeah. He's coming to some of the conclusions that we as fans have come to from watching this squad forensically for years. Let's see what he does to fix that first. If what he does to fix that lacks the necessary kind of deftness that I would be looking for from a manager, I'll be the first to say, let's move on. Let's move on from this. It's early enough that we can move on and start over. I can't do that until he has a window to fix the obvious gaps in the squad that are becoming more obvious to him now. Yeah. But back to that Forest game for a second. The first thing I want to set straight, and I don't mean to, if I sound patronizing here, then it's kind of because I'm not sure what other tone to strike with this very specific point. Sure. I cannot believe that anybody sees that first goal as anything other than Archie Gray's fault. That is not Vicaria's fault. And let me detail why it's not Vicaria's fault. And we need to clarify this, because I touched on the last call that I just feel that for whatever qualities Archie Gray has, there's something about him that seems to bring the blinkers out in Spurs fans and a lot of the media. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And this is yet another example of that.
I'm going to fight you, by the way. Just so
fight me. You're not going to win, but we can try. Yeah. Mm-hmm. There are two videos that are going to evidence this really clearly. One is that the video itself, the clip itself. Go back and watch it. And the second is a game against Southampton last season that we won 5-0 at their place. And I think we scored after about 35 seconds.
Yeah, the Jed Spence turn.
Yeah. So I would like people to watch those two videos off the back of this video and then come on next week and tell me whether I'm right or whether I'm wrong. Yeah. So the first thing, that play, and it is a specifically drawn up play, is something that Ange did more than even Thomas Frank has done. And the play goes like this. Goalkeeper rolls the ball or kicks the ball to the number 4. Yeah. It's got to be that number 4, because the idea of it is that you're trying to draw the opposition out of their shape.
So the number 4 being that a lot of people would call a number 6, the defensive midfielder.
The defensive midfield player. So the defensive midfield player drops either just inside the box or just outside the box, facing the goalkeeper. This play is designed to pull the first line of the opposition out of their shape. So beat the first line of a press. So the goalkeeper is meant to pass the ball to the player under the most pressure. That's the point of it. If he passes it to the 2 centre backs, you don't beat a press. So what happens is the 4 gets it, the centre backs split. So watch Romero and Van der Ven. Romero splits to the left of Archie Gray, Van der Ven to the right. So at that point, it's a one-touch move. You pass it to Gray. Gray needs to be able to lay it off one touch, either left or right. Look closely at that video. Van der Ven is in a slightly dubious position, so it's quite tricky for Gray to play a first-time pass to Van der Ven. It is so easy to play a first-time ball with his right foot to Christian Romero, at which point the 2 fullbacks, who have now moved up a step, receive the ball from Romero. If you want to know how to do the play, look at the Southampton game right last season at a similar time. Kick off. Ball goes back to the goalkeeper. Goalkeeper rolls it to Lucas Bergvall. Bergvall plays it to Spence. Spence up the line. 10 seconds later, we score a goal. When people look at these teams like Man City or Borussia Dortmund or vintage Borussia Dortmund or Barcelona, teams that could dominate the ball at play and pull the opposition out of their shape, they just think it's a matter of 11 very talented players all in sync. That is a drawn-up design play, and it begins with that first bank, which is how do we beat the forward press? We beat the forward press by having our defensive midfielder under pressure, and then he lays it off, and at that point, the opposition cannot react quickly enough for to stop the mismatch that takes place in the fullback positions. So there is only one scenario where that could possibly be Vicario's fault. It would be if he underhit the pass, he overhit the pass. He didn't do either of those things. He played exactly the right ball for Gray to be able to lay it off first time to the fullback. It is entirely Archie Gray's fault.
Okay, so can I fight you yet?
Sure.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you in terms of Ange played that move. We played that move under Ange. I think if we didn't play that move as a fan base, we'd be like, we're the only team who doesn't play the bounce ball into the 6 and all of that. I totally agree with that. What I would say is, because you can play that move. That moves on for you, it doesn't mean you have to do it every time. So yes, I agree that it's the right move and it does help break us out of the press, but it doesn't mean you have to play that pass every time. And if he's too close to him, which I think he was, Sangare was too close to him, and then to go, I agree with what you're saying about he didn't underhit the pass, he didn't overhit the pass, but he did give the pass to the wrong side. He gave it to his left foot, and that's why to me, Archie Gray tries to take a touch on it rather than hit it first time. Now, just to give you what I think should have happened with Vicario, and I will go back to what I said after that Fulham game where Vicario made his mistake as well. I think there is an undertone in Vicario's head, a subconscious 5-10% in Vicario's head at the moment, which is thinking like knowing how the Spurs fans are feeling, which is like, we have to be progressive all the time. We have to be, bumping it off even when under massive pressure, etc., etc. What I would say is in that moment at 0-0, and I'm talking about decision making, at 0-0 away from home against a team where you could almost tell in that first 20 minutes that the first goal in that game was going to be absolutely everything. That I would like Vicario's 10% of it has to be really progressive every time because otherwise I might get booed to change into actually there's a really easy pass to Mickey van der Ven on my left who can then open it out to the left fullback as he'd done 2 or 3 times already that game and just say probably bumping it into Archie Gray just when Sangare is that close is too much of a risk. They're my points of view on it. That doesn't to me mean that you're wrong. It just means to me that in that kind of decision-making window, it's like, can you make a decision in that window that is going to mean we're not going to concede a goal? But however, to play devil's advocate with myself, obviously, there's a side that you can say, well, if he's going to think like that, he's going to always think like that. So he's never going to play that ball and we're never going to break the press. And as a fan base, we're going to complain about the fact that we're going side to side in the U shape and we're not trying to break the press down the middle. I understand that. But I also think it's just about as much decision making and making sure you don't concede in that particular moment, in that particular game. That's where I'd go.
I guess his 3 options there. The going long option is exactly the thing we had an issue with against Arsenal, that we defaulted to the long ball. So there's no way I'm going to criticize him for that. The going to Van der Ven or Romero with the safer option pass, that's falling into AVB territory. AVB was a 60% possession guy. Spurs had 60% of possession in every single game. None of it mattered one little bit because we could never beat even the first line of a press. Yep. That third option, the one that he went for, I would agree with you if I didn't strongly disagree about that left foot, right foot thing. He puts enough on the ball that Archie Gray can make that pass left foot or right foot. Trust me.
So why do you think Archie Gray tried to take a touch then?
Archie Gray is not a super confident on the ball player. He's not Lucas Bergvall. Lucas Bergvall is possibly too confident on the ball, but he's confident enough to do things first time. Archie Gray's not that. He's not that. And I've watched him enough to know he's not that. He isn't even, I'm not saying he's not a better player or not going to be a better player, but he isn't even Harry Winks confident on the ball. He isn't. He's Oliver Skip confident on the ball.
Winksy actually was really underrated in terms of his ability to take it on the half turn.
Exactly. So anyway, that was my point.
I think like I said, I don't disagree with you, and I totally understand it, from a tactical point of view. But let me just add one more thing about it is I don't think that goal gets conceded if Kinski's in goal. Now that's not me saying I think Kinski should replace Vicario, but what I'm saying is in the modern day. Your goalkeeper is actually so good with his feet that he is making it much easier with that pass, or an ability, of course, to chip it over both those players into central midfield to a ball that Dominic Solanke, could deal with.
Well, it's the next thing I was going to come on to. Me saying that goal is not Vicario's fault is not the same as me saying that I feel completely secure with Vicario in goal. If you want to give examples of where Vicario has proved really suspect this year, you're not short of options, whatever you or me think about that first goal. That second goal is 100% his fault in that game. I think that's dreadful goalkeeping in terms of his footwork, his body shape in relation to that cross. It takes no deflection. His eye line is really clear, and yet he cannot anticipate the trajectory of that ball. It's just poor goalkeeping. He conceded a similar one against Brighton, which was a shot, but really similar early in the season from Ajari, I think. My issue now with Vicario is growing. Initially, I felt like there were 2 shortcomings that he had as a goalkeeper, but both very fixable on the training ground. The first one was the one that I noticed in his first preseason, which is his feet. Yeah, I didn't think he had great feet. I actually thought that was used against him unfairly for most of his first season and last season. There weren't many examples of his footwork costing us goals. There are now some solid examples of his footwork costing us goals. Yeah. The second thing is the thing on crosses. I felt his crossing issue was more based on physicality. So the Nathan Ake goal that where we conceded against City in the Cup, started it, and then there was a little trend for a few weeks of him conceding goals from corners when there was a high level of physicality. Now he's conceding goals from different types of crosses, whether he's challenged or not, because he's not reading the flight of the ball. His concentration level isn't there. There are many examples now where I'm starting to feel like, we really might need to start looking at other options.
Well, and they are. It's no coincidence. Paul O'Keefe came out this week and said Spurs have suddenly moved goalkeeper up the priority list, and they're starting to look at other people.
And I get why. I feel like the Kinski noise would have been louder, but for his poor game against Newcastle in the cup this year. He made blatant errors in that game. Because for me, you said that goal doesn't get conceded with Kinski in goal. I think the reason you're probably saying that is because Kinski's got the best feet in the Premier League, other than Edison and Alisson. The two Brazilian goalkeepers are uniquely brilliant with the ball at their feet, and Pickford is really good with a long pass, right? In terms of just general possession, like an outfield player, Kinski's top 4 in the league. So the other things, I'm expecting the goalkeeping coach to really, focus on those other things. He's a great age where he can develop into being an elite goalkeeper in the Premier League.
I think we should. I think we should get him alone. I think we should get him alone, get him some more games because he's not gonna. Well, he's not gonna come in instead of Vicario. I mean, the other thing about Vicario, and let's move off him in a second. But he is. I think he's probably one of the only goalkeepers in the league now who, in terms of his place kicking, like not just goal kicks, but when he's kicking from the floor, he does it in a like an old-fashioned goalkeeper way. There's so much air on his delivery. It's the trajectory of it is just so high, and it makes it much harder for the forward players to hold it up. Whereas if you see modern keepers now, they're cutting under it, and it's driven into strikers' chests. But I still would be surprised if, unless an opportunity came up, if Spurs went big on a keeper. But I've been saying, I think the one I've seen over the last few years who is the equivalent to me of that Alisson move that Liverpool did, where they paid the big money, is Diogo Costa from Porto. He's the one who I think has it all and will want to come into the Premier League, and that Tottenham should probably make a go for down the line. But anyway, carry on. What else from the Forest game?
Well, I mean, again, the very, very last point on Vicario is, because I've had quite a high level of faith, I haven't even looked at alternatives until now. I feel like I'm only just opening my eyes to what's happening with goalkeepers around Europe and in this league, because I felt like he was going to be a secure one for years to come. I'm really alarmed by his start to the season. It's my last.
I think personally, you said, he has made some changes on the training ground, which I think has made him a little stronger physically in terms of corners and crosses. But I also think the change in manager and style has really affected him, because if you remember when the thing that was so visible with Ange's defending was he would not allow his back line to cross their own 18-yard line. And it actually became a problem by the end, because opposition teams knew they just dink it over the top of the 18-yard line and they can have runners going through. But because he wouldn't let them drop past the 18-yard line, we'd win a lot of offsides. But also it meant there were so many bodies in front of people kind of 21 to 25 yards out that a lot of those shots would get blocked. And now the back line are so deep, they're often on their 6-yard line or 8 yards out, that the shots come in and they're either going to get deflected or he's being blocked. So his positioning is now being found out a little bit as well, because he's got so many bodies in front of him. And he needs to find a way to evolve to that, or he needs to do a Van de Ven and Romero, go to the manager's office and say something needs to change, and hope that Thomas Frank agrees in the same way that Ange did.
No, I agree. I mean, look, he's falling dangerously now into Aurelio Gomez territory. Gomez was, for me, the best shot stopper I've seen at Spurs pretty much ever. But he also made some of the biggest clangers, sometimes with shot stopping too, right?
They were really clowny. Gomez's clangers were really clowny. The only one that was really clowny, I think, is the Fulham one for Vicario. Although I do think, and it kind of went a bit under the radar, the Morgan Rogers goal at home against Villa, where it was just basically down the middle of the goal and he was in the wrong position. That looked a bit clowny to me. But anyway, clowny is a horrible term, and obviously Ange wouldn't like me saying that word. But you know what I mean. But I like Vicario as a man. I like him as a leader. I think he is a good goalkeeper. I think he's an elite shot stopper.
Yeah,
but there's something he's not evolving with this season that means it's making him look worse.
I agree. Anyway, let's get off Vicario. And there were other problems in that game that go way beyond that. I've got to say, like, while I like the idea of two forwards who interchange, you know, the left sider being quite comfortable being a 9 and the 9 flipping to the left side. In my head, the default should have been the other way around, as in Kolo Muani is the one who's playing predominantly as a 9, but with a tendency to drift, and Richarlison doing a lot of the ugly tracking back work.
Agreed.
It's not like that at all. And this is the stuff that I'm going to give the manager a shortish period to work it out, right? Shortish. And absolutely no excuses once Solanke comes back and we have a few more options in terms of who plays the 9 and who plays on the left, because that feels like he's making hard work of an obvious thing. It feels like the most obvious thing in the world.
The only thing, can I offer a reason that is the only reason I can think of, which is where I look, is like, what is it that the manager has to deal with when he sees this that we don't? And that is hierarchy. And I think, you know, hierarchy mixed with, he's looking at Richarlison's stats and he's got Justin Cochran in his ear saying, well, Richarlison scored 17 from his last 24 starts, right? So we can all see, and presumably he can also see, how Kolo Muani is so much better at holding it up. He can link players in. And also Richarlison is a really good wide left forward as well. But he's thinking, I don't want to upset Richarlison because, you know, he can down tools pretty easily in terms of letting his head drop. So I can't really push him out wide when, you know, this other kid's only just coming. This other player's only just come in. But like you said, I'm willing to give him a very short period of time, by which I mean, I really think he should be starting Kolo Muani in the 9 tomorrow.
Yeah.
And if he doesn't, then I don't really understand it other than that kind of bollocks hierarchy thing where managers like, I can't upset the more senior player. I can't upset the player who's been here longer. Do you know what I mean?
But maybe, but Richarlison doesn't give me that kind of, I can't imagine Richarlison flexing much about the period of time he's been at Spurs or having airs and graces about him. He always feels.
I don't think he'd knock on the manager's door.
No,
I think his head would drop. You know, the moment that the team's announced. Oh, you know, I wanted to play number 9.
I just think Richarlison should be grateful to be in the team.
I agree.
Stop. He's not. He hasn't done enough at the club to feel any kind of way about not being the starting 9. I feel maybe his main reason for doing it is because Kolo Muani is generally good with the ball at his feet. So he imagines Kolo Muani cutting in from the left side just gives you a little bit more, finesse on the ball than Richarlison doing it. But it doesn't always work like that. For me, Richarlison's strength when he comes in off the left isn't in possession. It's like a late arrival. He makes good runs, getting into the boxes and playing off a forward. I don't expect him to beat 2-3 men to get into the box. That's not what I'm looking at. We'll get that from Kudus on the right side, Yeah. It's about a balance. And that feels very, very obvious. But still, like I said at the beginning of this, I worked it out that we'd had 6 performances that I felt good about, 6 that were truly some of the worst things I've seen at Spurs, and 4 that, it could go either way. I mean, some people wouldn't put the Manchester United 2-2 in the middle. Some people wouldn't put the Newcastle 2-2 in the middle. They might think it's worse than that. But give or take, it's 6-4 and 6. Is that sackable? Not quite. And the reason it's not quite sackable is because we've got more tools that he hasn't been able to work with yet. I'd like to see what he does with some of that talent when they come back, and that's soon, hopefully. Also, he has not had a window to rectify things that he would have picked up on already in these few months and gone, yeah, that's a bigger problem than I thought in the summer. Let's see what we can do with the midfield player of that ilk in the mix. Let's see what we can do with a forward who has those attributes that these ones do not. I need to see how a manager responds to the recognition of where his team falls short. He hasn't had that yet. I'm all in favor of getting rid, if you're absolutely sure that there's no further you can go with this manager, Leverkusen keep getting mentioned as a team that made a really quick decision on Ten Hag. The Ten Hag decision wasn't based on any tactics. It was because he was an impossible human being to work with.
And he was apparently doing some underhand stuff financially, trying to do some weird deals.
Exactly. So there's no point in comparing that to Thomas Frank unless people know of some conduct by Thomas Frank that I don't know about. Yeah, purely on a footballing basis, I'm just a believer in two windows. First window being the very first one. They've arrived. They've not managed a single game, but they can already see from the outside some obvious things. Bring that person in. It's going to give me sound footing. The next one is the more important one. Theories have been put into practice. It is the first opportunity to rectify that. If we are to believe the rumours, Spurs have a little bit of money and we're going to back the manager to an extent in this window. I expect us to buy one player for sure, maybe even two, as in two starting level players. After that, I give him a month of working with such talent to see some kind of upward trajectory in these performances and in these results. If I don't see it then, my decision is made then. I may not make the decision, I may not pull the trigger then, but my decision is already made, and it's about going out there and finding the right manager. So on the first day of the summer, you go, Thomas, that was beautiful. Off you go. We have a replacement. That's it. Okay. We have to start behaving like a grown-up club. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Let me try and give you a chance to offer some positivity as well. Is there a chance, it's very hypothetical, that tomorrow, because Thomas has had a week to work with these players, it's pretty much our first free week, I think, since the preseason to some degree, certainly. It's the most time he'll have had on the training ground. Is there a chance that he's going to show us or have shown the players over the week, okay, I'm going to give you a little bit more license, or I'm going to, I have evolved a little bit, which is why I was trying to get, Vicari to play the bounce ball off Archie Gray and get people playing through the middle. We have evolved, and we're going to see something a bit better and a bit different. Because I think, if we play some decent football and we make some chances against Liverpool at home and we lose, 2-1 or 3-1 with a breakaway 90th minute third, I think people can handle that. But I'm offering the chance for a bit of positivity for Thomas Frank to say, and if he can show us a little bit of that and we can make some more for me, I think a lot of it is about the chance creation. It's the chance that there's none.
But we need to get our story straight. So you're saying that hypothetically, if that happened, you personally would feel pretty good about it, and you imagine Spurs fans would. But you probably said the same thing.
I say I'd accept it? I'd be more accepting of it.
Okay.
I'd be more let me be sure. I'd be more accepting of it than I've been of anything I've seen recently.
Sure, but my point is you would have said something similar going into the Brentford game and into the European match. We did do something more encouraging, but we were only one car crash performance from everybody wanting the manager sacked again. So even if we do deliver against Liverpool, a performance and a result against Liverpool, one thing I can promise you is he hasn't suffered his last defeat of the season. So within 3-4 matches...
You're sounding like Thomas Frank.
if within 3-4 matches, he then rehashes another terrible Nottingham Forest type display, do we then want him out again? I just think we need to make up our minds now.
Can I just offer a little bit? Can I offer where I think that's different? I agree with everything you're saying about, Brentford and Slavia Prague, and we saw something. But then straight away after the Forest game, you're led into the data and the stats of the teams that we've beaten this season. And other than the Man City game away, which, unfortunately you can't, depends how you look at it. But basically, even Nuno beat Man City. Do you know what I mean? Every team that we've beaten has been of the standard of Brentford that day or Slavia Prague, frankly. So what I'm talking about a little bit is where the nuance comes in is I want a performance where we make some chances against someone half decent.
Okay. When we beat Leeds, I was told Leeds hadn't lost the home match in 1 year. When we beat Everton, I know Everton had not lost a single home match in that stadium. When we beat West Ham, it's not a stadium we often win at. So we can do this however you want to do it. I can put across a compelling case for some of those results. I can say, well, we're going to finish higher than West Ham, Everton, and Leeds. So what great scalp is it to beat Everton, West Ham, and Leeds? We can do this. So we beat Man City. We say, well, we always beat Man City. But you could always say we're the only team to beat Man City on their ground this season. So
I agree. But I don't remember. I have to say, I don't remember any of those games being particularly like, oh, Spurs are a dominating force in these games. And I'm not. And you know what? And honestly, he's not going to set up against Liverpool to try and dominate at all either. But the issue will come, I think, is if we make, and I'm resigned to it. When we get to half time tomorrow, it'll be like under 1 expected goal, 0.05 expected goals or whatever. But it might still be 0-0. But I think when it gets to that point at half time tomorrow, when it is like that, I'll be like, I know we're going to lose this game because we're sucking the ball in our own net by allowing Liverpool to be like, okay, well, we haven't scored maybe, but we're really in this game, and they're going to get more confident. They're not really blessed with that much confidence at the moment anyway. So it's a mindset thing and it's a chance creation thing. But I don't disagree with what you're saying. I know exactly what you're saying, and you're right. And usually, I have to say, I'm very glass half full, and will make your arguments to other people. But I've seen a little too much of this Thomas Frank thing at the moment to think that I'm not sure. And this comes back to what we said about the changing room and the "you're not my father." I don't think that. I think that thing of "you're not my real dad yet" is too much for these players to get over at the moment.
Fair, but where do we go from there then? Because whoever comes in next is also not their dad. So, like, what?
No, but then what happens is at least you're not that stepdad.
I know, but honestly, I think as a club, we need to deal with this in a mature way, and a mature way doesn't mean that you clearly back a losing horse for months on end. But neither does it mean that you fire the manager at the first opportunity when you could reasonably fire the manager. Like, this is the first opportunity where we could, because there seems to be enough of a sample size now that people have him down as a particular style of manager. I will feel more confident about that personally when I see what he can do with a wider pool of players. And I don't mean a speculative one of players who are never going to play for Spurs. I just mean the guys that we've got on our roster who haven't been available, plus a 1 or 2 realistic type signings that we could make in January.
Okay, let me ask you let me ask you a hypothetical question then. If he gets, and he won't, but if he gets 2 really brilliant progressive passing midfielders in January, an Adam Wharton and a Musa Dembele, let's put it that way, do you think straight away, he will be like to Vicario and to Romero and to Van de Ven, it'd be like, just give it to those guys. They'll take it on the half turn and we'll play some lovely stuff through the middle.
Let's go back to Pochettino for 1 second.
Yeah.
Spurs played in the course of, over a period of 2-3 seasons, about 12, 13 games without Musa Dembele in that period, in the magic period of when we could have won the league in the Leicester year. We had a better chance of winning it in the Chelsea year and the first year after that. Almost every single time Musa Dembele wasn't in that team, the team looked dysfunctional. People don't remember that because it's all part of a generally positive period in the club's history. Whenever we went with Wanyama and Dyer, or Winks instead of one of those guys, or any other combination, including Eriksen in the middle,
Musa
and we did it one, Musa Sissoko, or Eriksen is in a 2, or sometimes Dele a little bit deeper. Whenever you took Musa Dembele out of the system, the thing no longer looked functional. So let that be a little warning to Spurs fans whose only reason perhaps for backing Thomas Frank is because they think that in the summer we're going to get Pochettino back and everything's going to be okay.
No, I agree.
The point I'm making there is there are specific individual players who are cheat code midfield players, and they fast track you into a passing style that may or may not actually be part of a manager's philosophy because of the unique way in which they play. Now, is Adam Wharton Musa Dembele? No, but Adam Wharton has his own game, his natural game. If Adam Wharton's in your team, you can only look so dysfunctional as a passing team. Just as his game. He gets it, he turns, and he lays it off. It doesn't matter whether Thomas Frank has designed that play or not. We will automatically look a little bit more assertive in possession.
I completely agree, and I think we mentioned this before. I think Carrick more than comparing him to Musa Dembele. For me, Carrick would be like how much better Spurs looked when Wharton would make us look more like Spurs. How much better Spurs did when Martin Jol got Michael Carrick. That's what I think. Now, what I want to say about that, and it's a wider point, that this is where Tottenham have to change fundamentally as a club. Under the Lewis family and Vinay, is they need to pinpoint in the same way that Jurgen Klopp and the higher ups at Liverpool pinpointed exactly what they needed. And if they need to look back and say, well, why were we so good under Maurizio Pochettino? And they need to be able to see, well, that player was there. We need that. And if Tottenham are able to change their recruitment and their way of looking at things as a club and say, well, what do we actually really need? Well, we need that player, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we'll probably realistically need two of them. And we might well need also a bit of a magician at some point, a maestro like Christian Eriksen as well. And I'm just talking about narrow. I'm talking about down the middle of the fucking pitch in the spine of the team. And you can probably add on the goalkeeper as well if we're going to be realistic.
Yep.
Then again, it comes back to this. We cannot take a punt on players who might become that, which I think we have a few players who might become it. We have a few players who it's unlikely, but Lucas Bergvall could, he's already getting bigger, but he could become braver and he could become, a really brilliant 8 player or 6 player, whatever. Or you can do, frankly, and this is where we need to do what Chelsea do, which is they're like, well, we buy Moise Caicedo and we'll spend £100 million. We'll buy Enzo Fernandez, we'll spend £100 million. Now, do I believe Tottenham will do that? No. And as a result, I think we're going to be left behind and it's going to be difficult. Well, left further behind.
Well, I understand why you don't believe we'll do it, because history tells us that we haven't done it. History's rewritten. We think we have to give this kind of brand of ENIC an opportunity to show us where there are differences. But that's, for me, this window right now.
Well,
I'm not talking about the summer. No. I'm talking about their first available window to show us that there is obvious strategic change.
Yeah,
it has to happen right now.
Yeah.
And people saying, well, you're limited in what you can do in January. You're as limited as you want to be, right?
Exactly.
There's some teams right now who already know they're not getting relegated this season, and their primary concern is that they don't get relegated this season. There are other teams who know that, their financial fair play situation is now in peril and they need to make a move either now or in the summer. There are all sorts of teams in all sorts of different situations. If you are a serious club, if you're a club that's saying we're tired of our place in the food chain and we want to make a move that puts the whole world on notice, you make that move. You say to Crystal Palace, I know that Adam Wharton is a guy that you think the world of and you want to build around for the next few years. But I think you like the look of 90 million much more than that idea.
Steve Parish would love it.
And just do it. You do it. You go, look, guys, keep the change. Yeah. I don't know what you value him at. You probably value him at 70, 75. We don't have the time for that kind of negotiation. 90 million, keep the change. Yeah. We'll loan you one of our youngsters as well, just for kicks, right?
Yeah.
We have to become a little bit that club. That's where I absolutely agree with you. The Declan Rice thing, the Moises Caicedo thing, pay the money, watch the asset develop to a level where it looks like small money somewhere down the line. No one's questioning those investments, Chelsea and Arsenal investments now, because the general perception that those two players are as elite as it comes in their position, right?
Exactly. Do you have anything more to say on the Forest thing before I go to a word from our sponsor and then
we'll
get some transfer stuff?
We'll leave it there. We might end up touching on it when we talk transfers, but we're good.
Well, in the second part, we're going to talk a couple of transfer links and then the Liverpool game. But here's a word from our sponsor. 1 second. Get yourself to okjersey.com where you can buy the best football shirts around, including this one I'm wearing now, and of course the absolutely magnificent black Spurs away shirt. And as if that wasn't enough, if you go onto their website and like the look of one of the shirts there, choose your size, pick the Champions League badge for the sleeve as well if you're that way inclined, then go to checkout and type the code BARN into the coupon section. That's BARN as in short for Barnaby. And when you do, you'll get a whopping 8% off your purchase. Now, I'm no mathematician, but 8% means if you've spent, say, and let's face it, I'm being optimistic here, 100 quid, then you get £8 off, not to be sniffed at. Get yourself to okjersey.com to pick one up, or if you're too lazy to type in the website, just scan the QR code that's on the left of me throughout this video. Enjoy. Okay, George, I'm going to give you a couple of transfer links, one of whom has been linked with us kind of pretty much all the time for the last 18 months, and one that is a bit of an out there one, seemingly more opportunistic. Conor Gallagher obviously wants to try and get back in the England team, and I think I think Atletico are ready to let him go, and he's ready probably to come back to the Premier League. Your facial expression suggests that you don't think he's an answer for Spurs. For me, it comes into I'm interested to hear what you think, but it comes down to, if he's been on our list for so long, does that suggest that maybe nothing's really going to change? If he's the kind of player we bring in?
Honestly, Conor Gallagher has been two very different players in different phases of his career.
He was great at Palace.
But neither one is the player we need. So his Palace thing was Lampard. He was Lampard at Palace. Yeah. He played as a goal-scoring midfielder that looked really, but the team never looked that functional around him. My closest friend is a Palace fan, so we've always talked about, Olise and whether his ceiling was going to be at an elite club, or Eze and Gallagher, all of the different attacking midfielders and wingers they had. I feel like I've scrutinized them as much as I have the Spurs versions, right? He was just a funny player who had a great knack of arriving in the box late and an edge of the box threat, but didn't have any subtlety of pass, no great vision, wasn't tactically that flexible.
Real workhorse though, right?
Real workhorse. And that workhorse thing was then developed to then relocate him deeper in the midfield. So he then became less the sort of Dele Alli, Lampard type midfielder and became this other midfielder. At no point has he ever been a possession player. So if Spurs want to rectify this issue we've got now of not seizing games and setting tempo in games and pulling the opposition's midfield around, he is the worst option for that. That's not to say I don't rate him. I think he's somebody who could be very valuable for another team and whatever their shortcomings happen to be. But our shortcomings have been the same since Moussa Dembele left. And he's not the midfielder to solve the problem. Yet he is consistently linked with Spurs across every manager we've had. Yeah. I don't know why. And I don't know why.
Sporting directors are the same, presumably.
Sporting directors are the same. What are they looking for? It's stuff like that concerns me much more than whether Thomas Frank is the manager or not. Like, it's that stuff. It's that big picture thinking from somebody who has decided that that's the guy. And I know that there are other versions of this, and some of these players are quality, like Bastoni, who has been linked with Spurs across many managers. Yeah. So there is somebody somewhere who seems to think that that's a player worth, spending a crazy amount of money.
But Bastoni would never come to Spurs, I don't think. I said it in my video.
Not now.
I can't see it happening. Not now. The other one that's more opportunistic, because apparently, according to Spanish reports, he's fallen out with Bayern Munich, is Leon Goretzka.
How old is Leon?
He's 30 years old. He's probably on, what, 200 grand a week minimum?
Yeah. How mobile is Leon Goretzka now? I don't see him covering the ground he used to. He was just like an oversized midfielder for years. He was just eating up, a bit like the way he's better, but a bit like the way Doucouré when he was at Watford and first joined for Everton. He just seems so much bigger than everybody and dominant. I don't see those legs in Goretzka anymore, but at his best, he's like wily, he's got a good football brain and he covers ground and he's super experienced and can play in different positions in midfield. I don't mind that thinking. I like that we're looking at, say, a 30-year-old who might still have 3-4 good years in them, as well as, our usual base of 23, 24-year-olds with sell-on value. I'm just not quite sure whether, again, he's the guy. It's the possession thing. We are at a point now, a lot of people think the squad is all the way dysfunctional. It's really not. The nature of dysfunction is that you're literally one or two away from being god-awful or great. Now, I'm not saying that if we buy those two players, we win the league. But if we get the right profile midfielder and one more of the right profile forward, it will enlighten so much of this. Like suddenly you'll be like, oh, wow, I didn't realize that the team were capable of such and such. I obviously don't want to undo the great things that Pochettino did for Spurs, but I've got to keep referring back to that because it's something that came up in a lot of conversations with me and my brother, who's also a big Spurs fan, just how often we looked useless when the midfield wasn't quite right.
Right.
When the key pieces weren't there. But history's blurred that now. We look at that entire period as a great period for Spurs. It was very player dependent, that period.
Yeah, and we mentioned already about Moussa Dembele, but to bring back the one that I'm always surprised that Spurs fans almost completely overlook is Christian Eriksen. He was just an absolute. He would drag us out of the fire. So I'm not suggesting he was in any way a physical central midfielder or whatever. But in terms of, especially with his relationship with Dele Alli as well, the amount of goals that they scored for us and assists that they got for us, that we do not have anywhere near the creativity. And I'm actually going to do a video that I might release over Christmas where I'm going to compare our squad now to the kind of 15, 16 Spurs squad and just try and discuss how far away we potentially are. And I would say those two, it goes as read that Harry Kane is a huge difference. And Sonny to some degree as well, although he wasn't at his best at that point. But I think in terms of those two and the creativity they brought, we're miles off.
But Eriksen is a different kind of creativity, though. I mean, I like Eriksen as a creator, but when teams would sit back with their two banks, his style of creativity didn't actually solve that issue.
I mean, quite regularly he would score goals in the last 20 minutes of games from 23 yards.
That's what I was about to touch on. That's where he was a huge asset, is that he was a 25-yard threat, and we haven't had that in open play since. Maddison was meant to be that, but he hasn't produced consistently from range.
Well, ironically, I would say I bet Ange probably was like, Matters. More importantly, you get it out wide, get to the byline, and you can make a late run if you want.
When actually he's not as good as Eriksen, but he has the Eriksen profile to have been that midfield player for years. Even when Eriksen was at his peak and scoring double figures goals from midfield and being a creator of a particular kind. So think, for example, of that brilliant assist for Dele Alli in the semi-finals against Chelsea. He could do that kind of thing all day long. But that stuff of two banks very deep lying, that wasn't the kind. He didn't have the pass to break that down. The only Spurs player who did, weirdly, had no legs. They couldn't run. It was Lewis Holtby. Lewis Holtby was brilliant at that ball.
Nice
he
player.
could get it, turn, and play it through the eye of a needle, but he couldn't run.
Whereas Eriksen could an absolute banger at Craven Cottage
against Fulham.
Fantastic. I really like when Lewis Holtby came in. I really liked him, and then I think Spurs grew ahead of him. Do you know what I mean? A little bit.
He can run. So in those Europa League matches where the pace was like nothing, right? Yeah. He could run those matches the way Lamela could run those matches.
Well, Lamela also couldn't run.
He can run. This is my point. Those games are slow. Premier League, those guys couldn't adapt.
Okay. Last few minutes. Let's talk about the Liverpool game. We're recording this Friday morning, so Thomas Frank hasn't given his pre-match press conference yet. So we were not sure on the team news, for instance, but got to assume hopefully it's relatively there or thereabouts. I think we both alluded to being disappointed with the lack of physicality against the Nottingham Forest central midfield. Liverpool do have a few issues. Obviously, Salah's away on AFCON. I think I heard Szoboszlai's out, which was a good thing for us, I think. What's your instinct, though? What's your instinct on what will happen tomorrow? I saw, I don't know if you see him, but the guy who's like the main face of Liverpool fan TV, the bald guy who gets himself in trouble every so often. I saw him yesterday say, I think it'll go one of two ways. It'll either be we'll spank them and put an end to Thomas Frank, or we'll give Thomas Frank an opportunity to kind of rebuild his relationship with the Spurs fans. What's your instinct on the game?
Well, he's covered himself, hasn't he? What else is going to happen?
Well, no, it could be a flaccid, 1-1 draw, I guess, and both teams are shite.
Look, I'll take the flaccid 1-1 draw off the back of that rubbish last weekend. What's my instinct? My instinct is, look, they say expectations are premeditated disappointments, right? So I'm not going to expect that we're going to produce a more cohesive performance just because we've had a week off. But my hope is that week of training ground activity, I hope this with the 4 days of training ground activity before the Forest match, that didn't turn out too good, but you could see that they've clearly been trying to work on something. They just couldn't execute it. Their execution was terrible, right? I'm hoping we see tiny better execution in terms of pass and move at tempo and put that team under pressure, because we are underachieving based on the expectations that most Spurs fans have of this pool of players. Their underachievement is greater because when they bought who they bought this summer, it was a foregone conclusion. Every single person I asked for their prediction this summer said Liverpool are going to win the league by a streak because they won the league by a streak last year, and they've now added Isak, they've now added Ekitike, they've now added Florian Wirtz. without bothering to think about the transition time required for those players to settle into a new system, I was told that there was no race this year. So the fact that they're in a conversation with us rather than the one against Arsenal, their underachievement is massive, and we have an opportunity to put them under huge pressure. Spurs, but we need to change. Look, the stories we tell ourselves as human beings, and certainly as a fan base, we manifest them, right? We need to
based
change
on
them.
evidence.
And based on evidence, they're having a rotten season.
True,
and we're having a rotten season.
True.
We're both having terrible seasons. And I think for their pool of players, they're having a worse season because our players are not on their level. So I think we need to start flipping the narrative. We should be putting pressure on them. We should be saying, this guy could lose his job if they lose against Spurs this weekend, because it's more embarrassing for him to lose, to them to lose to us than for us to lose to them, right?
That's true.
So, I'm hoping that we see some kind of performance. Do I feel super optimistic about that? Not really. My feeling is that we might see a performance that leads to even more pressure on the manager. But I'm hoping that a week on the training ground does not lead to that at all, but leads to something a little bit more calibrated.
George, you have, while you were talking, it came to me, light bulb moment. I know exactly what's going to happen tomorrow, and I'm afraid it doesn't sit with flipping the narrative. But I'll agree with you. I hope that Thomas Frank is flipping the narrative. That's what I hope is happening within the squad, and that Romero and Van der Ven are saying, come on, this is an opportunity, and it's a big problem for them, blah, blah, blah. But this is what I know is going to happen. And it's a light bulb that's apart from you. Florian Wirtz and or Alexander Isak. So I'm spreading my bets. I'm hedging my bets a bit. Will have their best game for Liverpool. Absolutely guaranteed. Absolutely guaranteed. So much that I'm thinking of going to William Hill. Like Alexander Isak will either score a hat-trick like Eza did, or Florian Wirtz will get his first goal for the club, and it'll be like, here, he's arrived, and that's what will happen.
I believe the Alexander Isak thing is based on actual form. His record against Mickey van der Ven is really good. He was the first
on his arse a couple of times.
Yeah, he was the first striker to really kind of humiliate Van der Ven. Van der Ven was pretty much unimpeachable up until that 4-0 loss a few years back where Isak hurt him badly. So I would be worried about that anyway, irrespective of the situation. Florian Wirtz, the style of player that he is, it really depends on how we set up this midfield. I'm hoping that Lucas Bergvall plays. I'm always hoping that Lucas Bergvall plays. I think Palhinha probably should play this game, if I'm honest. I think you'll need a certain level of physicality in there.
Is there an argument that if you're in Thomas Frank's head, is last week's performance against Nottingham Forest permission for him to bring back the double axis?
No, because the double axis
in his head. I know we don't think so, but in his head.
Maybe, but we've already detailed that Spurs have had 6 dreadful performances this season. The double axis probably played in 3 of those, right? So it comes down to, I was told that his strength was his flexibility and his ability to read the opponent and set up in such a way that causes them problems.
Horses for courses.
Horses for courses. So I don't want lazy kind of, oh, well, that didn't work, therefore I'm going to go back to the other thing that didn't work. No. Look at this Liverpool team. Look at their strengths and weaknesses. Set up accordingly. And the fans need to play their part. I keep saying it. We need to play our part. It was a game a few years back for Spurs. You might be able to remember this. I think it was against PAOK Salonika.
I won't remember that.
We lost 2-1 anyway in a Europa League match. At home. Luka Modric scored a penalty for us in that match. It's one of the only matches I've ever sort of attended where I looked at and I thought, wow, we've lost. And do you know why? Because their fans were absolutely insane that day. I remember thinking, if our fans made the decision every now and then, the decision to win a match, as in you are not leaving our stadium with anything, I wonder what would transpire. Because we've been at the opposite end of that many times, where we've been to opposition stadiums or we've seen their traveling fan base and thought, wow, that goes way beyond the 12th man, right? Liverpool are a club under pressure. If as a fan base, as a club, we decide to say, look, we know that Thomas Frank is in a horrible position right now. We're not enjoying the football, but we also recognize the occasion. We're going to make this hell for Liverpool today as a fan base. they're not going to enjoy this experience one bit. I wonder what that does. I wonder what that does to just the feeling of the day, where from day one, it's smoke and it's noise and it's banners and it's whistling every time their players on the ball. Me and you talked about this off the air, but Spurs played Fulham, and Fulham's team that day was Leno, it was Iwobi, it was Smith Rowe. It was practically a who's who of ex-Arsenal players. Not one of them were booed that day. We saved the booing for our own goalkeeper. Like, every so often, we need to be able to put our opinions, our egos, our identity to one side and go, both things can be true. I can not be happy with Frank and not happy with Levy and not happy with the club, but I can also really do everything I can as a fan to get my team over the line today, you know?
Yeah, I agree. And unfortunately, I think that's something that Woolwich have over the last 5 years, they've done really well. They've done really, really well. And I saw a video just last night, actually, while I couldn't sleep, which was of there's an archway somewhere near the Emirates. And it was before the North London derby, and they were all there were thousands of them, or 100 filling this arch, the railway arches, and they've got flares going, and they're getting the atmosphere before. And we do see when Spurs are playing decently, we see those clips from under the South Stand in the bars, and the atmosphere is really good. But it doesn't really yet. We're not able to yet get that into the stadium. Other than that, I was at the Man City home game in the Champions League quarterfinal, the first European game at that stadium, and that was the best atmosphere I've ever been. So it's possible, but actually, one thing. I'll end this with some positivity. I think Vinay Venkatesham knows that, and I think Vinay Venkatesham is trying to start. So that is some positivity. Okay, I'm not going to ask you for a prediction because we were so wrong with our predictions last week. But George, thank you so much for coming on the show. Really appreciate it. Brilliant chat. And the audience really love it when we have our chat. So really cool. Let the audience know, for those who don't, where they can come and see your photography and all your other great stuff.
Yeah, look out for... I'm going to put you to a different handle this time. Mo_notice. Moments Notice is my monthly music improv event. So it brings together guys from the jazz world with both some classical, with spoken word, grime, some big names from Saul Williams and Kay Tempest, and have all played that night. And the concept is that I bring musicians together who've never improvised together. And without rehearsal or sound check, they need to do that in front of a live audience. And it's a pretty unique kind of experience. It's almost like signing 3 or 4 football players who've never trained together and expecting them to turn it on at the weekend. Yeah, it's that sort of thing.
That's Mo_notice. Yeah.
Mo_notice.
And where and when is the next step event?
It happens at Amp Studios. We don't. This is the kind of off season for us, really. So we're back in February. Yeah.
Okay.
So, but look out.
Where is Amp Studios? So it's in London, but whereabouts?
Peckham, Old Kent Road. So in between kind of Peckham and Elephant and Castle. Yeah.
Fantastic. And what you just said, I'm just going to finish on this because you just said about, you're talking about jazz, obviously, and music, but actually what you said about putting 4 players who've not played together. I stumbled across a few clips from a few different eras of Spurs, but the era where we had the lovely white Adidas shirt with the blue stripes, the very early 90s. And then the era of Harry Redknapp, the Erasmus shirts, where when he just brought in Adebayor and he had Modric and whatever. Just a couple of clips that I've seen looking back to just be like, wow, yeah, we were dysfunctional and we had some, we never, back in those kind of days, more so, we did a bit more in the Redknapp days, but it really felt like those kind of days, like, we had a team full of individuals, a team of players who were really flary, but we didn't quite have a great team like we did under Pochettino. But actually, it just goes to show exactly what you were saying earlier, that when you're dysfunctional, you're only a couple of decisions away from actually being able to play some wonderful stuff. And these clips I was watching, we used to play some amazing 1 and 2 touch triangle stuff, like the Adidas shirt one when we had Tim Sherwood as well. Like those games, I think those games, for instance, are good examples. Leeds at home in the cup, where with Darren Anderson was a big part of it as well. 1 and 2 touch triangle stuff, playing it around the corner and scoring from 25 yards. That's what Tottenham's all about. And I think the sooner, just to end on this, the sooner that Thomas Frank realizes that, you get the fans behind us. Now, I know that's difficult because also if we start just having a team of 11 individuals, that will get pulled apart pretty easily as well. But frankly, at this point, I'm yearning for a long range screamer.
Oh, well, we're not sure of that. Richarlison when we get battered 4-1 by Arsenal. Spurs are the kings of scoring great goals when
they
no
don't
one
count.
cares.
Yeah.
Come
Yeah.
on.
All right, guys, thank you so much for
Yeah.
watching and listening wherever you are. Please do give the video a like. Please do subscribe to the channel. It's going to be kind of daily Tottenham transfer news. Look, we're only about 10 days away from the window, and especially taking into account that Semenyo possibility, which I'm sure we'll get gazumped in, but he is going to have to move in the first 2 weeks of the window. So things are happening, and I think moves are being made. Really appreciate you watching the video. Good luck tomorrow against Liverpool, and of course, come on you Spurs. Get yourself to okjersey.com where you can buy the best football shirts around, including this one I'm wearing now, and of course, the absolutely magnificent black Spurs away shirt. And as if that wasn't enough, if you go onto their website and like the look of one of the shirts there, choose your size, pick the Champions League badge for the sleeve as well if you're that way inclined, then go to checkout and type the code BARN into the coupon section. That's BARN as in short for Barnaby. And when you do, you'll get a whopping 8% off your purchase. Now, I'm no mathematician, but 8% means if you've spent, say, and let's face it, I'm being optimistic here, 100 quid, then you get £8 off, not to be sniffed at. Get yourself to okjersey.com to pick one up, or if you're too lazy to type in the website, just scan the QR code that's on the left of me throughout this video.